Massive flooding in Nigeria kills at least 100 people across 10 states. Can solar power light up the continent? We'll have a report. And Melinda Gates details the Gates Foundation's battle plan for the war on poverty in Africa. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, massive flooding following heavy rain in much of central and southern Nigeria has proven to be deadly. At least 100 people have been killed across 10 states in the past several days. Sani Dati, spokesman for the National Emergency Management Agency, says such flooding tends to occur every year during the rainy season. But this year, the devastation has been the worst since 2012. Conditions are reportedly especially dangerous in the city of Lokoja. This city lies at the confluence of the Benue and the Niger, Africa's third longest river, making it particularly vulnerable. Kogi and Niger are states in the center of the country, whereas the other two are in the southern regions.
When the water was coming, we were thinking that maybe it was just an ordinary rainwater. So we didn't even think that maybe the water would come like this, you understand? So we just like the first room, the water entered the first room. We thought it was a joke. Then when the water came to my own room, that was when we knew that yes, the water is very serious, you understand? So everybody just like pack.
Well, flooding in the Lokoja region in 2012 killed more than 350 people and destroyed farms and other property. Environmentalists blame the annual floods in part on what they say is the Nigerian government's failure to invest in infrastructure, including drainage systems. In Central Africa, thousands of parents are withdrawing their children from schools in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon after armed men attacked and wounded dozens of people. Separatists fighting for the independence of the English-speaking regions of Cameroon had warned parents not to send their kids to school, saying they could not assure their safety. Dozens of villagers and parents searched the forested areas around Sase and neighborhood in the southwestern town of Bue early on Tuesday, looking for students who fled after an attack was launched on the St. Joseph's College on Sunday. At least 3 students who fled were found. That's according to Senator Charles Mbella Moki. The Israeli government now says it will allow 1,000 Ethiopians to immigrate to Israel. It's a rare intake of the so-called Falasha Mura community, but less than 8,000 Ethiopian Jews who want to move to Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that a special committee has agreed to allow Ethiopians who already have children in Israel to immigrate to the country. A non-governmental organization petitioning Israel's government to allow Ethiopian Jews to immigrate called Netanyahu's decision an incredible disappointment. About 8,000 Ethiopians have petitioned to move to Israel, claiming to be descendants of Ethiopian Jews. However, Israel does not consider them Jewish under strict religious law and says their immigration requires special approval. Now, sub-Saharan Africa's effort to electrify is not just a matter of building big power plants and installing towers and wires. Solar power, feeding both into the main grid and powering remote areas, is gaining favor. In this segment of Empowering Africa, VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young looks at this approach to bringing light to the people of Africa.
In thousands of small communities across Africa, work stops at night because there is no reliable supply of electricity. The World Bank says that only 22% of rural sub-Saharan Africa has secure electricity supplies, and that holds back economic development. A major reason for that gap is explained by an energy analyst with the development organization World Resources Institute, Lily Ordano.
You have a large proportion of the population living in very sparsely distributed areas. And so the government just realized that it just doesn't make economic sense for us to think of extending the grid to all these people. So we do have to think of alternative sources.
One of those alternatives is solar power. The solar panel and the batteries that store the energy the panels generate are becoming more efficient and more affordable every year. With outside financing from grants by international organizations and private equity partnerships, solar companies are popping up throughout the continent, such as M-Pesa in Kenya and Indigo in South Sudan. Most operate on the PAYGO system. Customers pay a relatively small amount up front to get the panels installed. They are connected to a box that works like a digital parking meter. Users pay via mobile phone using the electricity as they need. Often after a set amount is paid in, the customer owns the system outright. Even small solar systems can have a big impact. More on that from the Deputy Director of the U.S. government's Power Africa program, Matthew Reese.
Bigger systems are starting to take place now that could even in theory bring on the ability to have enough electricity to run a small refrigerator or some hair clippers or a sewing machine, some type of light industry where you in your home with your own household electric solution can begin to engage in value addition or light industry or have a better job.
A private equity partnership built the massive solar-powered Garden City Mall in Nairobi. With its shops, offices, and apartments, its solar panels generate up to 858 kilowatts an hour. But an energy analyst says the solar industry needs to reduce costs and improve efficiency to make more large solar projects viable. The World Bank's Musa Blimpo.
If we are thinking about electricity in terms of contributing to the structural transformation of our continent for creation of highly productive new type of jobs, the jobs of the future, we still need for the off-grid solution, the mini-grid solutions, we still need to see more technological advancement.
We'll explore other renewable energy solutions for electrifying the continent in coming segments of Empowering Africa. Jeffrey Young, VOA News, Washington.
Well, big swathes of sub-Saharan Africa lack electricity. Governments and communities are examining a variety of solutions. One of them is wind power. In our next segment of Empowering Africa on Wednesday, VOA's senior analyst Jeffrey Young looks at how wind can be a valuable addition to the mix of power generation systems. So be sure to join Africa 54 tomorrow. The U.S. ambassador to Zimbabwe, Brian Nichols, is refuting claims from some Harare officials that sanctions are to blame for the growing economic and health crisis in the southern African nation. Zimbabwe is battling a serious cash crisis and a cholera epidemic that has claimed the lives of more than 30 people. At least 3,000 suspected cases of cholera have been reported. Nichols says the sanctions are targeted at some senior government officials, not ordinary Zimbabweans. VOA's Marvelous Mlanga Nyahuye spoke to Ambassador Nichols on the issue.
The U.S. policy toward Zimbabwe has a number of elements, but one of those elements is legal, and that's ZEDERA. To put it as simply as I can, if Zimbabwe fulfills the requirements of its 2013 constitution, it will meet the requirements of ZEDERA. ZEDERA covers lending by international organizations to Zimbabwe and forgiveness of the debt that Zimbabwe has to those organizations and countries in the Paris Club. The sanctions that exist are executive branch sanctions on 154 individuals and entities, and it prevents people from the United States or through the United States economic system from providing economic benefits to those people, or can prevent them from traveling to the United States. So there are two different areas, but Zimbabwe's progress in building a democracy that respects the tenets of the 2013 Constitution is the key thing that it needs to do.
And we saw only yesterday the U.S. saying that they will not lift sanctions against Zimbabwe until there are reforms. What kind of reforms is the U.S. looking at?
Well, there's legislation that does not comply with the 2013 Constitution, POSA, AIPA, those legislations that cover the Public Order and Security Act or freedom of speech restrictions. Those are things that President Mnangagwa has said during the campaign that he was committed to repealing or revising. And I think if he were to repeal those laws in concert, obviously, with the legislature, that would be an important step in fulfilling the requirements of the legislation.
And on the health side, we know that the USA is really involved in PEPFAR, but we have a cholera epidemic currently underway in Harare and Zimbabwe. Is the US going to step in and help?
Well, yes, actually, I was just visiting the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta last week and had the opportunity to discuss this issue with them. We have an excellent relationship with Zimbabwe on issues of health. And I was very impressed to hear the close coordination and work that's being done. Cholera is a preventable disease, and one of the most important interventions is dealing with water and access to clean water. So we definitely want to work with the people of Zimbabwe and the government of Zimbabwe on promoting access to clean, potable water. There's also a vaccine, an oral vaccine, that can help prevent cholera. Now, it's not 100% effective, but it does help people either prevent infection or recover more quickly if they are infected. And we're working with the government of Zimbabwe on a vaccination program that hopefully would cover 300,000 people.
Well, that was VOA's Marvelous Mlanga Nyahuye speaking with the U.S. Ambassador to Zimbabwe, Brian Nichols. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, what the latest report from the Gates Foundation concludes about the war on poverty in Africa. But first, a look at Tuesday's headlines.
בישראל 1,000 מבני הקהילה שילדיהם
أيام أعتقد سوف ترجع الحركة طبيعية كما كانت.
Well, it's time for Health Report, and joining us now is Africa 54 Health correspondent Lino Mudu with new information on the war on poverty in Africa. Hey, Lino.
That's right, Vincent. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has just released its 2018 Goalkeepers Report. It's an initiative launched in 2017 to track progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, a collection of 17 global goals set by the United Nations to address issues such as poverty and inequality in the world. I spoke to Melinda Gates, a co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and asked her why it was important to publish such a report.
Well, these goals that were set by the member nations of the United Nations really are a roadmap and a blueprint for the world on if we make these investments, we can really make progress as a world. But we felt it was important to publish a report every year so that we hold ourselves accountable as a world to these goals, and we can actually measure year by year, is the world making progress? And it also shines light on countries that have made certain investments investments like Brazil on nutrition or Vietnam on education to say these are exemplars for the world. They've made incredible progress by the very specific investments they've made, and these are roadmaps for other countries to then follow.
Now, this is the second publication of the report. What did you find significant this year?
Well, one of the biggest findings that we wanted to highlight that I think we felt many people didn't know was how young the population is in Africa. 60% of the population is under the age of 25. And so if the world makes the right investments in health and nutrition and education, this is an amazing generation that has unbelievable ingenuity. And if we make those investments, we give them leadership opportunities to lift their societies and their countries up. And we want to make sure that message gets out to the world. Let's make these investments so that they can change their whole country.
Clearly, investment is very critical in terms of carrying this young population in the future for economic growth. What are your thoughts on the importance of young people in Africa's development as we look to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, the young people often have the new ideas, they have vibrancy, they're energetic, they see things in a different way. And if we make sure that we give those leaders opportunities, they will seize them and they will make sure that things change in their countries. Some perfect examples are some of the young women I'm meeting in the health sector. They're saying, we're realizing that if we give access to contraceptives to young women, that is women who come in who are 16, 17, 18 years old, and we're not biased about how we treat them, oh my gosh, they can space the births of their children and attend school and stay in university. We know that those investments in contraceptives, that when women have access around the world, it lifts up their whole family and it lifts up whole economies. And so I'm inspired by these young leaders who say, I'm going to work on taking bias out of the healthcare system. That's just one example of many.
When you look at where we are, I know we just talked about access to contraceptive and family planning. What do you see as other priority areas in developing countries, especially African countries, as the world looks to achieving the SDGs in 2030?
In countries, the investments that need to be made are in health and in education and in the agricultural sector. If you make investments in all three of those areas, so in health, making sure that the number of childhood deaths go down by vaccinating children, making sure people have access to malaria bed net, making sure they have access to contraceptives, good nutrition and counseling around nutrition. In education, we've made as a world a commitment in the previous set of goals to make sure kids had access to school, which they now do. So enrollment's there, but we need to get the quality of education to come up, much like Vietnam has done, as we highlight in the report. And then in the agriculture sector, we need to make sure that we help countries move from subsistence farming to making real investments so that you can do larger scale farming so they can feed themselves. And again, we give a great example of that from Ghana in the report.
Let's look at poverty. I mean, we've been talking about this to some extent. Since 2000, more than 1 billion people have lifted themselves out of extreme poverty, which is a great achievement, and this is mentioned in the report. However, the report also says that decades of stunning progress in the fight against poverty and disease may be on the verge of stalling. To what do you attribute this challenge?
Well, we wanted to highlight what we're seeing. So, as you said, this incredible reduction in poverty, incredible. But what we don't want the world to assume is that it's inevitable. It is because of investments the world made systematically in human capital, in health, in education, in agriculture. When those systematic investments are made, you see this enormous reduction in poverty, and life gets better. It improves for people around the world. But conversely, if you don't make those investments, if you don't continue to make those investments, a lot of the gains that we've seen can drop back, particularly with a growing population. And so our messages to the world is, keep your foot on the gas, keep the accelerator going. We need to keep making these investments. Both we need high-income countries to make the continued investments in things like the Global Fund, and we need low and middle income countries to keep making the investments in their own country and then measure it with great data, because that's how we learn.
And Melinda Gates, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Lenore.
Melinda Gates says the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's future priorities in investment will continue to focus on health, agriculture, providing quality international education around the world, innovation, as well as women's empowerment, because it will lift up the whole world. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Vincent?
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore. Now, be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, the multitude of species that make up the plant and animal kingdoms are not the only forms of life on our planet. There is another unique category of life that is separate from plants and animals. They are the vast and often strange species that make up the kingdom of fungi. Scientists say there are millions of different fungal species, from mushrooms to molds and yeast. At a recent symposium on the state of the world's fungi, the first global overview of these organisms, scientists and policymakers call for more research, saying we ignore these vital life forms at our peril. Here's VOA's Faith Lapidus.
Fungi come in all shapes and sizes. More than 3 million shapes and sizes. That's 6 times more unique species than the entire plant kingdom. So far, only 5% have been named. And Kathy Willis, Director of Science at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, says no one really knows how many are under threat.
We have, 60,000 animals that have been assessed for their threatened status. We have 56 fungi that have gone through that same process. So we simply don't know.
And Willis says there are important reasons to find out more.
If we do ignore them, we're missing these incredible opportunities that are out there for new fuels, for cleaning up plastics, for cleaning up radioactive waste. All those answers are there in fungi. But right now, we tend to put they're very much this sort of, let's ignore them, but actually they really are critical for so many things.
The new survey of the world's fungi reveals that 90% of all plants rely on their relationship with fungus to thrive, and that may be threatened by climate change.
And what's happening is that as it gets drier and hotter, those are the conditions that most fungi don't like. So as your climate gets hotter and drier, you're losing many of those fungi in the soil, and therefore the ability of the plant to function properly, to take up the nutrients, take up the additional water, is compromised.
The global survey and study of the 1.25 million dried fungi specimens at Kew will help advance understanding of this huge kingdom that underpins all life on Earth. I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Well, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, rappers are getting involved in politics, including one well-known rap artist who hopes to fix the country's problems by running for a seat in parliament. Chika Odua reports from Kinshasa.
They don't sound like politicians. They don't look like them either. But they are. One wants to run for local office. Another, Lexus Legal, the most famous in this group, is seeking higher office while calling for rap artists to get involved in helping fix the DRC's problems. For 20 years, Lexus Legal has built a career with his socially conscious music, commenting on youth unemployment, corruption, and other social ills. Now, he is running for a seat in parliament.
I want it to be known that I am not starting a new career, but it is simply a logical follow-up. Since I started my music, I have never eluded a political question. I frankly responded to all questions linked to politics. Unlike many others, I never qualified myself as apolitical. I've always been politically minded, even though I never joined a political party.
Politics and music are intertwined in the DRC. Here at the office grounds of the ruling party, singers and dancers are energized. President Joseph Kabila announced last month that he will step down after 17 years and has appointed a successor, Emmanuel Shadari. Local music artists usually make a living by supporting politicians, which some people criticize.
Politicians take musicians as simple public entertainers who sing their praises after meetings. From the very beginning, I refused to play that game. I have never performed during political discussions or meetings, but I do not criticize artists that do this.
Criticism comes at a cost, and the ruling party often stifles it. 6 opposition candidates eyeing the presidency have been banned from running in the December elections. Popular rapper Bob Elvis released this video condemning the corruption of the ruling party. His family told VOA that he was picked up recently by state security forces and detained for days. VOA reached out to Bob Elvis after his release, but he is in hiding, though he is reaching out to his fans on Facebook. Rihanna Prescott and her musical friends say politics is too dirty. She avoids talking about it in her music.
Music should be fun. That's why we do it. That's why people like it. It's happy, especially Lingala music, our local music, not music about politics.
But back at the meeting, Lexus Legal and other rappers say politics and music cannot be separated. Chika Odua in Kinshasa for VOA News.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. It's sleek, fast, powerful, and driverless. It's a BMW's first autonomous motorcycle, a self-driving version of its R1200 GS model. The bike not only rides on its own, it can also come to a complete stop on its own. But don't expect to see a driverless motorbike on the road anytime soon. It will not be developed for sale. It's for research only. BMW says the prototype will be used to help scientists develop driver assistance tools. Well, next up, tech advances are helping people with disabilities in new ways, from car windows that translate passing scenery into textile drawings to gloves that transcribe sign language into text. Improvements in artificial intelligence plus cheaper hardware are making it easier for inventors to develop new products that could end up transforming life for all of us. The advancements come as the World Health Organization estimates that the number of people needing assistive devices, ranging from wheelchairs to communication technologies, will double to 2 billion by 2050. Well, and finally, a new app is being rolled out to help Australian firefighters assess their mental health. It's been developed by the Melbourne Metropolitan Fire Brigade and allows users to assess their exposure to stress with an alert system designed to prompt someone to seek support. Firefighters log call-outs in the app, which then tracks and sends alerts when a user might need a hand. It might suggest a self-assessment or a checkup with a clinician. The app is expected to be extended to all emergency services personnel across the state of Victoria. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A lot of American English idioms refer to parts of the body.
Get off on the wrong foot.
Are Anna and Jonathan having trouble learning a dance? How did it go meeting your girlfriend's family?
Well, it was interesting. First, I was really late.
Oh, Jonathan.
Yeah, and then at dinner I spilled my water all over